around agentic, specifically in software testing, right? So we're now in this sort of it's kind of unprecedented times in terms of how much has changed and how many things have accelerated and what the art of the possible is now. In these last probably 6 to 12 months. And AI has been around for a while in different branches, but recently we've been seeing what's possible is just accelerated, which is exciting, and undoubtedly it's going to change software testing. So whether we're thinking about techniques of testing, whether we're thinking about who's testing when and how approaches. But I think where we're going to focus more today is how applying agentic into automation in testing. When we think about traditionally how that's done today and where we see that moving to, I think that's where we're going to see a really exciting impact. So we've got some things to talk about what we're doing in our product. We want to talk about what agentic is, and I think what the opportunities are in the QA and testing space. We talk a bit about what we're doing, what we've done. So we're kind of cover a few things today. It's a big area, so we might do follow-up sessions. Happy to receive feedback, particularly those interested in understanding a bit more or getting a point of view on this, and perhaps we can follow up with that post session. So I'm just going to take just a couple of minutes just to frame this this one-on-one session, and tell you a bit about our company too, and our platform, more through the lens of our vision, and then hand over to Hugo, who's better equipped and qualified to talk about more agentic items. So we started. So when we started Virtuoso, it was a bold ambition, right? So our mission was to become the #1 autonomous testing platform in this industry. And you've got to start with a bold and significant vision, I feel. So that's how we started. We started to conceive sort of ideas and where we might take a product, what kind of product we bring to market, what we bring to market first, where we were going to take it, and what were probably the stages that we would sort of work through to try and deliver on that mission. And I'll talk about some of those tech breakthroughs and things next, but the thing that we started with was to try and address some of the core problem statements in the industry, which was testing was typically overly manual. It was often, and whether you were automating some testing or whether you're manually testing, it tended to start too late in the process. It was often siloed or fragmented, and different teams responsible for different phases of testing. The world became more agile. However, testing tended to lag behind a little bit there and didn't really serve the agile transition so well. And a lot of that was because it was complex, it was time consuming, it was hard to maintain. If you scaled your testing, you had the burden of trying to manage and maintain all your testing to keep it purposeful and relevant to its objectives, right? So it was a big undertaking, I suppose, and some of the problems with it were compounded by just the move to more sort of iterative development, agile processes. So to cut through that, we thought, well, the first goal, and we're very goal orientated inside of our business. The first goal was to create and bring out the fastest products in the market for creating tests. And that's what we set out about doing. And that was kind of in 2019 with our very early version. And we measured it across some of a wide variety of use cases. And it was really exciting and validating to see the results we got through client use cases and what the before and after sort of metrics were around speed of creating tests, because that allowed us, I suppose that presented options of, well, if we're going to address who's testing, when they're testing, how often, how easy, how scalable testing can be. If you start off with real speed, you have options to sort of build upon. We brought things through like live authoring and recently we've been really enhancing that. So that authoring experience, it's the central area to testing, right? Writing and creating tests that test the software, that give you the answer, that informs the teams, that helps you make the decisions and how quick and how often you release your software. So Authoring was obviously very, very central. Not the only thing, but really key. And we needed to put together a unique approach to how we'd help both technical and non-technical people achieve that. Again, maintaining that speed. Um, our investment then as we got into 2022, and we're working now with a lot of large enterprises and a lot of interesting use cases, was to really focus on our alliances and partnerships and relationships, and it's a big, big part of our business. So we invested in a fantastic team of people to support our partners, to enable our partners, to train our partners, and to work sort of, shoulder to shoulder with them in terms of adopting Virtuoso and deploying it in the most successful way. So customer experience, partner enablement, partner training. And it's the reason why, one of the things we run these sessions, but outside of this, we give our partners, access to our software, training, support assets, materials, courses, certifications. So please reach out if you'd like to get hands on our platform, and you'd like to see what's available. And then more recently, as we've grown as a business, we've grown fast. We've reinvested back into that business, and we have now got a really healthy roadmap ahead of us. And we've obviously you know, looking at what now is possible technically, that move from really having bots automating processes now to agentic being a key opportunity for us. That's been something in 2024 into 2025 that's central to what we're doing from an engineering perspective. So just on that next slide, please, Hugo. So this is the sort of last slide that I'll finish on, and sort of hopefully tie a few things together before Hugo picks up. So when as I said, we came in with the mission, with the vision, to be that number one autonomous testing platform. And what we entered in terms of market was, organizations testing was overly manual. It could make it very resource intensive and quite expensive. And where there was automation, um, it was sometimes limited by what was available in terms of tools or technology. So it tended to be quite complex, and it ended then being more ad hoc and in pockets rather than sort of having end-to-end applications fully automated for testing. The maintenance was a problem, and it was difficult to get a really mature, cohesive, and successful automation sort of strategy in practice. Organizations have achieved it, and they tend to be the ones who invested the most and had probably the significant skills, but those organizations that didn't perhaps have those resources would really struggle. So we came into the market thinking we can address these problems. We can leverage newer technologies. We can bring new approaches and new techniques into a really easy to use SaaS platform that really made a difference and made an impact. And that started with things like natural language programming, machine learning based self-healing, and started to bring through. So we're AI native from the very beginning, and then since then it's the opportunity in the platform has been, how do we step by step move towards delivering on that mission? So tackling fundamentals of testing, obviously, is incredibly important. So it doesn't always have to be sexy stuff or the kind of wow factor. It's got to help teams really fulfill their objectives. But our goals were around how could we help teams do things just quicker and with more automated processes. So we've, that journey through more, I suppose, agentive and sort of team assisted solutions using AI has now sort of evolved into greater intelligence, more sort of decisioning, again, more goal orientated in the automation, going from simple tasks to more complex tasks now to more processes. So in terms of more contextual, more sort of autonomous aspects of the platform, we've seen that sort of increase and enhance through the journey we've been on, and now is probably the most exciting part is taking that leap now to fully fledged, more autonomous, agentic testing inside of our platform. That means, our teams, our partners can just reduce the manual effort, can spend time on more high value things, can get more success from the automation they're deploying in their testing processes, and hopefully transform the way in which they help test and release software. So this is a kind of bit of that journey we're on, and it won't stop. It's not there's not a single destination here. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep investing, and it's exciting that the agentic side of things is going to help us with ultimately delivering on that mission. So a little bit about kind of how we've looked at this and where we see the opportunities and where we're taking it. But I'll hand over to Hugo, who can talk more about technically agentic and its opportunities and where he sees things going to. So Hugo.
Thanks, Andy. So I think starting a little bit explaining what is agentic and why it makes sense for testing. So agentic AI is basically intelligent agents that not only are able to generate contents, but also make decisions, right? These intelligent agents are also being able to perform tasks, things that, for example, generative AI was not able to. It generates content, but it was always difficult to understand what is the return on investment on those applications. And what we saw last year was a lot of experiments, POCs, and things that we could not actually measure what was the impact. We see really interesting things, but how do we convert this to our users to actually see some ROI getting out of that? And we did the same thing. We did experiment a lot with lots of applications. We had lots of AI features that we developed during last year, very useful, that speed up testing, but the user still needs to go there and actually provide a prompt so the AI returns something that it can be used then. So thinking about this and thinking about the problems that we envision, like, for example, when we give a lot of information to a generative AI, we see that hallucinations and all kind of those things. So agentic also in the technology background is getting a step back. So breaking things further, so breaking tasks in very small tasks and specialize these agents in very smaller tasks and allow them to communicate between each other. So for example, it's not just a user to machine and then we get the output. It's basically having these agents trying to work out on a plan and a few tasks that can then be executed by those agents. And this is where we are thinking of leveraging our platform. So we built transversally across the product several generative AI features. Now we want to break them further and allow the agents to basically do the planning and communicate between them and to be able to generate assets on testing. And for example, if we are thinking about creating tests, right? If on that process, there is the need of creating testing data, there is the need of creating other assets that are not just the test steps. So if the agents know that they will need some values for the step, they can start talking with the test generation data agent, which will provide and create that test autonomously and so on. So now, how are we thinking to build this agentic AI platform? So in several aspects. So internally on Virtuoso, we want to automate most of the tasks that we can. So the repetitive tasks, which some of them involve decision making for sure, and outside of the platform. So integrating with other tools that organizations have on the software ecosystem and the organization ecosystem. And going to the first one, so internally on the product. So we want to drive this from requirements or some kind of a catalog of information of the intent of the project, of what organizations want to do. For example, we can talk about requirements. So if they provide wireframes, if they provide what changes or what new features they want to implement, the generative AI will be able to break them out in smaller tasks and distribute and planning that test strategy, actually creating what tests are needed so the user can actually validate if that strategy is okay, or refine that strategy until it's happy, and then going to the next stage where the authoring of those tests are getting processed. And this is, again, another agent that we will do the job. So We have achieved the first evidence of autonomous testing by accident, to be honest, last year, because we released an awesome feature that is a step IQ, similar to a Copilot, where you start typing the test and the auto completes. And with that, we understood that we started having the first examples where the machine was thinking and creating the test autonomously. So we are currently developing the autopilot, which basically is able to create a test by itself. So getting back, having the requirements, having all the test planning and the structure of the test that we need to perform, and then delegating to autopilot, we then again need a supervisor that sees the machine in action, taking the decisions, writing the tests, and the supervisor will basically guide the machine saying, okay, this is correct, this is not correct, but it doesn't need to be hands-on almost. So definitely the role of a test revisor or someone that sees the test happening being built still exists at this stage, because we need to continue to have a human intervention and human decision making or a human supervision, but the machine will leverage the workload, not the human. So this will free more time for people on testing to be able to do other tasks that are not as routine tasks, like creating tests or fixing tests and so on. So test auto authoring, it will be one of the first the most important things that we are going to cover this year. Test maintenance as well. So anytime that the application change, there is code changes. Virtuoso already for things that are static, not static, but if you change a button or if you change layouts or there is a small change on the application, Virtuoso automatically heals those tests. But how about if you actually make a major code change, like in adding more fields to a form, for example? So those tests need to be augmented. And this is what Virtuoso it doesn't do yet, and it will do this year. We are going to work on that. So it will analyze the application changes, how now there is 2 new fields, for example, on a form, and will propose an improvement on that test automatically. So that will be another step up on the test maintenance that we want to work on. And outside of the Virtuoso platform, so if we look at how teams work, for example, if a developer is fixing an issue and goes to, I don't know, their platform, the test management platform, where they say issue or the issue management platform in this case, and it says issue is fixed, it's ready for testing. So our Agentic AI will pick that change of status from there, will read the issue contents, and it will select the appropriate test to execute and validate that scenario. If all the tests pass, the tickets is changed automatically by our agents to done, fixed. And if not, if it continues to fail, then our agents will upload evidences that that issue is not yet fixed, and so on. So I hope this gives a little bit of clarity of what we are investing this year on Agentic AI and what Agentic AI is, and talking a little bit about our breakthrough of autonomous software testing. So this happened by accident. Like I mentioned, we were building an amazing feature, Step IQ, and it was in trial. I was trying it, and suddenly I was just pressing tab to accept the suggestion and enter to submit the step. And the obvious thing was, why don't I have just a button that says autopilot, and it basically writes all the tests for me. I don't need to keep pressing the tab enter keys. So and that what happened. So this is a rocket shop, a testing product, but we already have an example with Dynamics 365 automating the full journey. And how this works is basically it gets information about what is seeing on the page, the DOM page, the screenshot. It gets information about the journey itself, so the name of the journey, the checkpoints, and other ins like comments and stuff like that already exists on the journey, from written by humans or by agents, because the agent planning, it will be creating these directives for the autopilot to be able to generate tests. And it basically takes this to automate the journey. And again, it will create the test data, it will use variables, it will follow best practices, and so on. So that is how we are processing this and how amazing this technology is going to be when we release it. It will save a lot of time for our customers, for sure. And again, it was really something unexpected, because at the beginning of 2024, I was saying that we will probably achieve autonomous software testing in 2030. So it was a really good breakthrough. So moving forward to other things, probably not as much as interesting. So autonomous testing I already covered, and I think I already discussed how this will be processed. Is basically using the requirements and things that the user can feed in terms of information of the intent of what they want to do, and then the machine take the lead in order to build all these assets. The human here serves as a validator for this, and correction and interactive refinement of what AI produces. Then we also want to invest in performance testing, because I think it's a no-brainer for us. We already have everything that we need, and our users actually asked us, how about if I can have 200 users running for 2 hours to see if my application holds that load, because we are expecting this on the next release. And for us, it's just creating the infrastructure, because the journeys are already there. There is not more work that we are asking from our users. It's just going to the planner, just creating that plan to do performance testing. Be more specific about what is the duration of the test, how many users, concurrent users they want to do, and then we can launch that execution, and then have a comprehensive report about how the application have performed during that test. So then there is the business process orchestration, which is something that we are seeing a lot with enterprises, right? They typically don't have just one application. They have many applications on their ecosystem which communicate with each other. So for a full end-to-end process is no longer just a few journeys that we can execute, or just one journey. So the journey itself, there is one journey on each application which needs to feed in data to the next one and to the next one, right? So thinking about this is how do we orchestrate multiple applications that live on the ecosystem of an organization to be able to do an end-to-end validation of the whole process, and highlight potential problems like performance problems, where there are more flaky tests, where there are things that get stalled, or most issues that to give that visibility to key decision makers to be able to invest more in certain applications, certain areas, and so on. So this is the objective for business process orchestration. Then,
Hugo, before we move ahead, there's one question from Gokul.
all right.
Interesting one. So the question from Gokul is, how does the agentic AI optimize task execution and decision making compared to traditional AI automation?
Good question. So I think before we had like AI generative, where we prompted and then there was a response, and then the human needs to refine that response. Sometimes these generative AIs go on a tangent, right, and start hallucinating, and we have seen these problems. Like if we think about breaking things further and giving very small things to these agents, which can then bring an output and a response, then there will be a validator and an orchestration of those responses, which will not only validate if the response is in line with a few rules, but also allow them further communication. So send it back that response. So it will be communication between the agents that are providing information, and this will basically, it's a big difference that we have seen, right? We will have things much more the output, it will be much better than what we have seen with generative AI.
So
And they can use tools like, for example, search the internet, or search the customer data that exists, align with the style of the customer of writing tests. And these are the tooling that those agents bring that is completely different from generative AI. while generative AI just generates content, these agents can actually act, can search, can access things that are available for them that were not available in generative AI.
So if I have to reword, it's essentially more specific the task, the much better output and decision making from the AI,
Exactly.
from agentic AI approach.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Hugo.
So going to loops, this can be seen as a small feature, but it's a very requested feature from our customers, and we didn't have this in the product, so it makes all sense to build it now, and we are going to release this quite soon. I think everyone understands what a loop on testing is. Basically, is an iteration over a few number of steps, which can be fixed or conditional. So until something happens, you exit the loop, and this will allow our users to bypass some use cases and some blockers that let's say that they have when doing testing. And there are a few examples, like testing a carousel with 10 images. We don't need to write 10 groups of tests or 10 checkpoints, 10 library checkpoints. We can use one and repeat that 10 times where the test data will differ. And for example, on the conditional loop, it will continue until an API response is received, or a drop-down display at least 10 items, something like that. Like I mentioned, we have released Step IQ, which also is a great feature. It will basically, especially for someone that is new in Virtuoso, it just needs to type something, for example, the name of the field, and it completes the test. There is no longer a problem of, oh, I forgot to write the double quotes before on a field or on a variable. It basically doesn't matter because it auto completes. If I type the action instead of click, I set something else. It will correct that for me, and it will this have speed up a lot our test authoring in Virtuoso. So definitely it was a great feature, and especially because it's a non-blocking feature. So the user can accept or not. The user can continue to type the step or just accept the suggestion, which is a huge accelerator. And this came as an iteration of our first release, which was bulk step authoring, where we draw a region on the screen and then the AI generate a bunch of steps. But again, because we put so many information on generative AI, sometimes it hallucinated and generates steps that didn't exist on the page, and all the problems that we have seen with generative AI. This one is basically very straightforward, and is able to basically suggest the next step and the next step, even if we don't write anything. So for example, if we are filling a form, it will suggest the next form field and the next form field. So that's why then autopilot comes in the picture, because especially on certain use cases on the application, for example, forms, it works great, and we can just trigger autopilot to continue and generate the steps automatically for us.
Just going to say, Hugo, I think it's a really good example of, so going back to that last question, we look at the differences of more traditional approaches versus what Agentic gives as well. With Agentic, it's about system being able to adapt. It's about being more dynamic and flexible. It's moving away from rigid and predefined scripts that the system's following to getting to a step and taking in a lot of inputs, and there's behavioral and there's some context here, and adapting to that, and then providing suggestions and having that automatically sort of pulled into to then create that the journey. So I think it's, in some respects, this is one aspect and a part of the journey we're on, but it's a distinct moving away from that more traditional rigid approach to scripting your test.
Yeah, that's right. So there is also another great feature which we have released beta for a few customers, and we are evaluating the value that it delivers and the problems that it has and so on. Like typically our building process is like this. We release once a feature is produced, but then we go into customers and have their feedback to understand if it's ready to be general available, or if we need to work a little bit more on this feature. And Omni is one of those. We have released something that helps the user not only to understand more about Virtuoso, for users give documentation and links and videos to learn more about certain aspects of the product, but also can suggest things, how to improve things and how to do things for the user use case. So it's basically a chatbot where it provides assistance across the product, where the user can always go to in order to do something on a product, or if you have a blocker or difficulty on their test scenarios, and give the user suggestions how to move forward, best approaches, and so on. And that's it. We just got to the end of the presentation, so open for any questions.
So we have a first question from Sandeep to both Andy and Hugo. Either of you can answer it. So what role will agentic AI play in business decision making?
Okay, I can respond that. So I think first of all, the roles will be, for example, from test analyst, because if we are going to feed requirements and a bunch of things and planning testing strategy, the test analyst probably is the critical decision making here on the process, because it will read all the documentation, every asset that the user provides him, it will ingest that. And when I'm talking about the role, it's not just one agent, it will be several test analysts agents that will work on this. So each one will have a task. One will process the wireframes, another one will process requirements, another one can process code, testing test cases in code that existed previously, and so on. And they will analyze all this data, and then they will propose to a test plan, right, for to be validated by the decision maker user on this case. So it will already take the decision, if we look at this, saying this is the plan that I want to build. The user will serve as just a revisor to accept or not that plan, but the decision is made at that point. So the AI will bring up a test plan with the full strategy to cover all those requirements. So that is the decision making, most important decision making in terms of the business that exists. Then we can have a role, for example, of tester or test automation, which will basically make decisions how to write the tests. So following those journeys, they will understand which directives have been given for writing those tests, and step by step it will make those decisions. It's not much a business decision on that front. But I think those are the kind of decisions that we are seeing to be existing on the product. Then I think I already talked about when we are going outside of the product itself, it takes the decision of which tests to execute and not to execute, tests to basically cover more, cover less. I think those are basically business decisions that make sense to reference.
Thanks, Hugo. There's another question from Bala. So, and the question is, does this only help for test management related activities? Is there anything you have an idea to expand it to write the complete automation of the software tests, like requirements gathering, story writing, Jira, etc.? And first, let's just clarify that, hey, we're not just into test management. Our suite is completely to write a software test from an automation perspective. But Hugo and Andy, if you want to add a little bit more in terms of what we're doing to look at even requirements gathering and story writing in Jira.
So I was actually referring to full automation, not test management. So all the piece of agentic AI is basically gathering the requirements to actually have the intent of what the user wants to do, to test planning, and then implement and write all the tests for that test planning. Our approach will be to have always a human on the loop, to basically do the validation, simple validation, not to write any tests, but we are talking about autonomous testing and fully implementation of an autonomous testing. You cannot provide you can not provide the requirement and leave the autopilot on to generate journeys, but that will probably go on a tangent, right? It will start generating tests, but probably not in line with what you want. So if you don't structure, you don't provide that scope of what needs to be done, the work can still be done, but it won't match probably what the organizations need and want to have as a test strategy.
Okay.
I just add one point to that is that so we've got our partners on this particular session is called so in the last, I don't know, 2 weeks, the conversations I've had with different teams across different regions, practices or designations in our partners, no one's testing anything simple, that's for sure. So no one is. It's in fact it's more. I'm noticing that, say from 2 years ago, it's just the profile of what's being tested, the solutions being sort of released, what's in scope for partners and service delivery is just getting more complex, more integrated, more data dependent, etc. So my point is that we're aware of that. So we will not focus and try and promote any gimmicks, any gloss over substance. We are very much aware that our enterprise customers are trying to tackle complex use cases. So when it comes to anything generative and when it comes to applying agentic and decisioning and adaptability and moving away from rigid scripts, and I think it offers so much opportunity, but we do understand that it's complex stuff that you guys are tackling. It's not simple stuff. Simple stuff's easy to test no matter the approach. So that's first and foremost. So when we look at these ideas around, like Hugh was talking about, really end-to-end automation across the software testing lifecycle from the very beginning, the starting inputs through to analysis and reporting. We've got that complexity in mind, and we're making it really customer driven in terms of what outcomes do they want to reach. It's not about just trying to put in a nice bit of technology into our platform. It is about driving the outcomes. So we've got another question. Who's this? So, hey, Deepak, how secure will the proprietary data which belongs to organizations using agentic reference to data used in this script? That's for you, Hugo.
So we use always opt out from any AI provider that we use. So that is the only protection available right now. But we are implementing a framework where we will allow our organizations to choose, for example, different models, even on-premise models that we can use. So there will be definitely several options that we want to implement to mitigate those risks. But nowadays, I think using any provider that exists, as long as we can opt out for not the data that we provide being used for training new models or for training their models, I think gives that security. Moreover, we don't try always not to share private information. It's basically testing data, not production data or anything. So I think that in that case, I think it's pretty safe to assume that is secure. Of course, there is a mutual responsibility between Virtuoso and our customer, right? It's because there cannot be security needs to be a holistic thing, cannot be just relying on the provider to secure everything. The customer also needs to be aware that should not involve personal data on their testing or live data, because at the end of the day, it's a testing platform and we are doing testing. So all the process should be a testing ecosystem.
Yep. Just going back to the earlier question on the test management versus the authoring part. No, and I know that we're really strong in the authoring side and actually the automation side of things, and we integrate really well with the test management tools. But how do you see that evolving, Hugo, considering that there would be consolidation at some point in time, and there's possibly companies will have different approaches in terms of using a dedicated test management solution like Jira or X-Ray or Zephyr or ALM versus what gets into Virtuoso and where do we start? So what's your thoughts on that and how it would evolve going
Sure.
forward?
So we are not planning to build any test management application, right? When I said that we can develop the testing strategy is basically to create all the tests that needs to be done to cover those requirements. And those requirements can be pulled out of any test management or Jira user stories or any other platform that exists there. So we want basically to have the inputs from the organization about what they are planning to do, so we can give that to our agentic AI to make better decisions. So that is the only thing why I was talking about requirements and so on, and have a planification of all the scope, all the coverage that we need to implement will help then the agents to write to focus on each journey on very specific things, user paths that needs to be covered to have full coverage and not having repetitive journeys or like Andy said, we look at our customers and our partners with very complex scenarios that they need to test. They are not easy. So for a machine to be able to help here, we need to do a really good job of providing the intent and the context for them to be able to do smart and take smart decisions.
Okay. Thanks, Hugo. There's another question from Venkat. Is there any mechanism metrics for checking the evaluation of agentic execution so that we can enhance our prompts to perform better evaluation?
Yes, we do this internally, right? We need to have our own tests that will help us to know which when we change models, what are the performance and so on. And it's always a balance, of course, between performance and costs. And we do this internally. So definitely there will be a point on where if our customers have similar problems, we can implement a mechanism for them as well in Virtuoso to basically do those validations. However, we are always as an input and a system prompt and the contents, we are always giving the customer data to the AI, so it learns. So, for example, on the step IQ, I will give you a very technical example. It was generating, for example, in one scenario, the steps with the idea of the element and not the label, right? And I corrected the first step that it generated. I correct to use the label. On the second step, it didn't generate the step with the ID, already generated the step with the label. So on the next journeys that I will build, it will take that as a reference. So my preference is to generate the steps using the labels and not the IDs. And it will also follow groups of steps, how I structure my test with checkpoints. So journeys will get very similar to what users typically have. And it's a learning process, right? It will learn from what the user has assets are and things that the user changed to basically mimic that.
All right, great. Thanks, Hugo. I had one question before we get to other questions from the attendees. One was on, we're talking about different AI agents specific to each task, like authoring and test data or execution and so on and so forth. How do we envisage these would talk to each other? Because, hey, when we are doing execution, we possibly need to also look at test data agents and so on and so forth. So how do we envisage these would come together in executing the overall process that we are going to run with Virtuoso Agentic AI platform?
So can you repeat the question?
So it's we were talking about different AI agents which are doing specific tasks, like there's an agent for authoring, there's an agent for test data, execution, and
Yeah.
so on. So how do we envisage these will work together when there's a requirement to do so? So, for example, if there's a dependency for test data while we are authoring, how do those two come together, and how do the agents interact with each other if required?
Yeah, so there are different roles on the platform, and I don't know if I can disclose exactly what we are going to do because that's our IP, of course. But in those roles, there are the coordinator and the orchestrator, which will have a few rules that will send back the response to the AI if the response is not correct. Or, for example, when suggesting a step, I will give an example. It's suggesting a step with data, a static data, so data in the step. So there will be an AI that will be responsible to get that step and say, we need to replace this with test data. And that is how it's processed. Then the agent with the responsible for test data will create another column on the test data, will generate the same value, will include that value and generate other values for the data table, and we'll get the step corrected with test data.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. There are a few more questions. So one is there any specific security testing module?
No, we are not going into security testing right now. The future will tell.
Yeah. That's clear. Thank you for that. The next one is performance testing can be automated completely using agentic AI or AI agents, multi-agents from test bed prep to test report creation.
Good question. I didn't think about this because I thought performance testing is straightforward, but it's a good question because what if one of the requirements was actually to do performance testing? So maybe it's something that we will include. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Guys, any more questions? Feel free to post them into the Q&A. Just on the security testing, Hugo, though we do enable some amount of dynamic application security testing through OWASP ZAP, right? And that's something that, because of the extensibility, the way we have built it, it can work for some organizations. And we would be looking at expanding it to a proper security testing in the future. But
Yeah.
is that something? It's more of a clever hack rather than a core feature, but maybe that is also something which is helpful for people who want to do and leverage whatever they have done on the functional force to also do a dynamic application security scanning.
Yeah, we have use cases where we customize that approach to use OWASP top 10 framework to do some executions, security validation on the page. So there are a few things that we can do, but it's not Virtuoso responsible to give to do the security part of it or give a report. It can integrate with those tools, certainly.
Okay. So I think we are almost about getting to the end of the scheduled time for the webinar. I don't see any more questions. So I think since there are no more questions, we can close the call. Thank you so much to Andy and Hugo for coming on this webinar and explaining our vision and the future and how we are moving towards agentic AI. Guys, please feel free to send us some suggestions in terms of what would you want to hear in the next coming webinars that we do. So we do this monthly series, which is a 101, which is what you're attending. We'll have the invite sent out for the next month's webinar as well, but feel free to let us know what you would want to hear about more about Virtuoso or a future vision, and we are more than happy to accommodate that. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thank you again to Hugo and Andy for running the session.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Hugo. Thank you.
Bye. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.